Hello, everybody. All right, I'm going to be working on our Frog and Toad story, and I'd like you to work on another story elements sheet. In a minute, I'll show that to you so that you can get it set up on a loose leaf paper or a plain piece of paper. And you can always pause the video so that you can make sure that the grown-ups kind of set up the categories for you, or you can copy it yourself. That's fine. Okay, so here is the story elements sheet that you're going to be needing. And then when we're ready, it'll be the title, the author, the characters. Remember, people or animals in the story that are very important. Setting is where and when it happens. Problem is there will be a character who wants something, wants to do something, wants to go somewhere, but something stops that from happening. And the solution is, how do they solve the problem? So I'm going to be reading from The Frog and Toad Are Friends, if you remember, because there's lots of stories in here. So the one that we're going to read today is called The Story. One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you are looking quite green." "But I always look green," said Frog. "I am a frog." "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. "Get into my bed and rest." Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I am resting." "All right," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. "I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. "Perhaps this will help me to think of a story." Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. "Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. "I am feeling much better now, Toad," said Frog. "I do not think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?" "Yes," said Toad, "if you know one." "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch. but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he still could not think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end. "How was that, Toad?" said Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. So now get your story elements sheet and let's fill it in together. So the title, let's see, I will flip through to find where's that title, right? Where does the title come? Title comes at the beginning of a story, doesn't it? So let's flip the pages. Oh, there we go. You see the title? Yeah. The title is The Story. Next, you need the author. The author. The person who wrote the book. We have to go on the cover. There you go. Arnold Lobel. Okay. What's next? The characters. So who were the people or animals in this story? There they are. You have Frog and Toad. Let's see. See if you could find the word frog and the word toad so you can copy them as the name of the characters. Frog, Toad. And they do get a capital letter because in this story, that is actually their names, Frog and Toad. If we were talking about just any kind of frog or, oh, Miss Smith, I see a frog on a lily pad, then you would put a lowercase f. But this is the name of the characters, Frog and Toad. So you want to copy that for capital. With a capital because it's the character names. And then over here with the characters Frog and Toad, I'd love to see your pictures of Frog and Toad, how they looked in this story. Now the setting. Where and when does the story take place? I'm going to go to the very first page again, and I think there's some clues there. Look how it starts. One day in summer. Frog was not feeling well. Summer. So we know that it's summertime. That's when. Then I think there's another clue here that lets us know where we are. This is when Toad is talking. Today you look very green, even for a frog, said Toad. Get into my bed and rest. If Toad is saying, Frog, get into my bed and rest, then they must be at Toad's house. Because Toad says, get into my bed and rest. So that's the setting. We know now when was summertime and where we know that we are at Toad's house. The problem. A character wants or needs something, but something is stopping them. So let's see. Frog is not feeling well. He certainly wants to feel better, and he wants a story. But Toad can't think of one. He does a lot of crazy things to try and think. So the solution is thinking, how did that problem get solved? Does Frog feel better? Did Toad tell him a story? How did it get solved? And actually then, what does happen? Frog does feel better, but then Toad ends up not feeling good. And so, Frog tells the whole story to help make Toad feel better, who rests. So you fill that in, explaining the problem and the solution in your own words and sentence. 1 or 2 sentences for each is fine. And making a picture that shows that problem and that solution. Okay, and so you try your best, and I can't wait to see your story elements sheet. This was video number 2 on Frog and Toad. I will be doing some other ones. The next one, I'm not going to say what the answers are. I'll try to give you clues and focus on the page where you can find the information yourself. And then when your family sends me your picture of your work, you and your work, then I'll let your families know what the answers are. Okay, so the first 2 we did together. Bye.